looking at Marine One taking off from the White House. This is the very last time President Trump will be flying on Marine One as he departs the White House for the last time on his way to Joint Base Andrews. His presidency, as you said, Anne-Marie, ends today after 4 contentious and at times tumultuous years. The 45th president leaves behind a nation severely wounded, scarred by an insurrection at the U.S. Capitol, ravaged by a global pandemic, and crippled by the doubts he sowed over the nation's fair electoral process. So, what does this all mean for President Trump's legacy? With us now, CBS News correspondent Paula Reid and senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang. So, both of you, Weijia and Paula, have spent the last 4 years covering this presidency. You've been in the briefing rooms and the press conferences. Let's just begin with the experience and what it's been like for you. Let's start with you, Paula.
Well, one thing I will note as the president departs here, the White House, we had the opportunity to see President Trump almost every single day, not in the past 2 months, but before the election. We had the chance to ask him questions directly almost every single day, and that is something that we hope that the incoming administration will be mindful of and continue that level of access, not just to spokespeople, but also to the president himself and also the vice president. But in terms of the experience, I mean, what I'm reflecting on today isn't necessarily the interactions between us and the president. It's really about our team. I mean, what you see here on CBSN, when you see Weijia or I in the briefing room, we're not walking in there alone. We're walking in there with a set of questions that we crafted with our incredible White House team, all the correspondents, the producers, our supervising producer. We all worked together over the past, I've been here for about 3.5 or 4 years. We worked together for each of those press availabilities. We worked together every single day. Everyone on this team who worked here at the White House over the last year, they knowingly exposed themselves and their families to COVID to walk into this environment where administration officials did not care about COVID. They didn't take even basic mitigation measures. The space here, it is not glamorous. It is very tiny. It is cramped. It is unpleasant. This was an administration that often went out of its way to make our jobs, our basic day-to-day efforts to cover them as difficult as is humanly possible. So today, right now, I'm not so much thinking of really covering the president or, you know, sparring with him at press conferences. I am just so focused, Vlad and Anne-Marie and Weijia, on our incredible White House team and what it has been like to cover this story with them over the past 3.5 or 4 years. They do not get enough recognition for their outstanding reporting and their incredible efforts day in and day out.
Weijia, I think, well, first off, let me ask you sort of the same question when you kind of reflect on your experience over the last 4 years. What comes to mind?
You know, I think covering President Trump was the assignment of a lifetime because President Trump is a president of a lifetime. There will never be anybody inside the White House like him. And I think that while we realize that during our coverage, we certainly are thinking about it today because of the stark difference that we have already seen between the Trump administration and the incoming Biden administration. And so even though, you know, the president was very unique in his way. He was a character in everything from the way he spoke to reporters, to the way he interacted with his supporters, to the way he conducted policy. But, you know, I think that his legacy, and I've been thinking about this a lot, is really how he has reshaped politics in America and reshaped the Republican Party. And, you know, I know that our chief Washington correspondent, Major Garrett, took a look back. And, of course, he's absolutely right when he says you cannot divorce what happened on January 6th from Mr. Trump. But, again, that is part of sort of how, in a broader way, he has completely uprooted everything that we knew about the GOP and about, you know, Republicans in this country. And he brought that to light. And so I certainly also want to echo what Paula said. I think, you know, people don't realize how close we become as a unit when we cover this president, any president really, but because of the circumstances and because of the challenges that were unique to this administration even before COVID, it really took a lot of support of each other to be able to bring you guys the story day in and day out, because again, this was a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week assignment. There were no breaks, and so to do that, we really had to lean on each other. And I am extremely grateful for the experiences that I've had here covering the Trump administration, and again with our stellar team of producers and reporters and other correspondents, including Paula, of course.
So Weijia,
you guys,
as we already know,
sorry, Emery.
I was just going to say, as we already know that this administration's relationship with the media was challenging, to say the least. But in particular, this president and female journalists was bumpy. Vlad and I had the benefit of being able just to talk to you guys sort of casually, or as you're getting a coffee or whatever, and get some of sort of the background experiences that don't make it into stories. So Weijia, both of you had sort of very memorable exchanges with President Trump. Weijia, you had a specific exchange with the president over the coronavirus during a briefing. Eventually he sort of walked out, but I want to play some of that.
Many times that the U.S. is doing far better than any other country when it comes to testing.
Yes.
Why does that matter? Why is this a global competition to you if every day Americans are still losing their lives and we're still seeing more cases every day?
Well, they're losing their lives everywhere in the world. And maybe that's a question you should ask China. Don't ask me, ask China that question, okay? When you ask them that question, you may get a very unusual answer. Yes, behind you, please.
Sir, why are you saying that to me specifically?
I'm telling you, I'm not saying it specifically to anybody. I'm saying it to anybody that would ask a nasty question like that.
That's not a nasty question.
Please go ahead.
Why does it matter?
All right, Weijia, man, we remember watching that. And, I think that if you're a person of color, you've had experiences where you hear something that sounds coded, like it's more than what's being said on the surface, but you just don't know how to react in the moment. And so I think a lot of people watched your face and understood what you were kind of going through. Can you kind of relive that moment for us? When the president said that, and when you thought, wait a minute, I got to ask him to explain himself.
Well, first of all, the answer was a complete 180 from my question, because I was trying to understand his thinking as he approached responding to COVID-19. And I think, trying to get some understanding of why he viewed it as a competition with the rest of the world rather than a competition against the virus, which is what it was. But to your point, Emery, I think, for every journalist, based on our personal experiences and our perspectives, we interpret things differently, we hear things differently, and I heard something in that question that I thought deserved a follow-up. And so I've reflected a lot about that moment, and I think what matters more than what I was thinking is what the president was thinking. And I think it just goes to show once again the lengths that he went to not take responsibility for the U.S.'s response to the virus. And from day one, it was going to be a blame game, blaming everyone and every thing except his own decision making, which of course now we know has been cobbled together in a way that is really shocking and will be written about for decades to come, because we know that even though he may have had good intentions, wanting to lead the country and offer hope, he said himself that he wanted to downplay the severity of this virus. And so in that particular moment, and aides have told me this in conversations, the president was just laser focused on the fact that I mentioned people were still losing their lives. And so he instantly became defensive, and that's why he, according to the sources who I've spoken with about this, that's why he said you should ask China. But, again, we're also seeing and hearing things in the moment that are different. And if you go back and watch Mr. Trump, the way that he delivered the very word China was emphasized in a way that could have been personal. So, we are always just trying to find more context for people at home. And that's what I was trying to do in that moment.
And, Paula, it was just, we just mentioned the way that the president talked about the coronavirus, the way he informed the American people, which is to say he didn't inform them all that much. And I'm struck by the fact that this week will mark the week that we first discovered that someone in the United States had been infected with COVID-19 just about a year ago, January 21st, 2020. And of course, yesterday we passed that milestone that we never thought we would. More than 400,000 Americans have died because of the coronavirus pandemic. And in addition to that, Paula, the President of the United States leaves office as the only American president to be impeached twice. When you think about that, and you think about, what I think about, Paula, often when I reflect on this presidency, I think what could have been. The president, and the reason we asked both of you to sort of give us your thoughts in covering this president, he made it about you. Journalists, the news is generally not about reporters, but the president of the United States, in sparring with reporters more than any other president in history, perhaps going back to the early days of the Republic, he made the story. His presidency is inextricably linked to the work that you and your colleagues at the White House Press Corps do. And I keep thinking back to what could have been. The President of the United States went to Washington, he said, to drain the swamp. We didn't see any of that. The President of the United States said that, he wasn't a politician, he was a businessman, so he was going to be able to rise above the partisan rancor and get things done. He was a great deal maker. Faced with this virus, can you imagine if the president had just simply told Americans to wear a mask, to be socially distant, and that we will get through this the way we've gotten through every difficulty in our republic, how different things might have ended for him?
Well, I don't necessarily have to imagine. We can go to our reporting from the beginning of the pandemic. Initially, the plan was to outsource the handling and the messaging to the vice president. They knew that this was going to be a political liability. There's no way a pandemic is going to go well. Now, no one could imagine it would go this poorly or be this big of a deadly disaster. But they wanted to pass the buck to the vice president in case it didn't go well. They could potentially replace him on the ticket or just lay the blame on him. Well, when the president saw how much attention, how much positive press, really, the vice president was receiving, he wanted to take over the messaging. Now, interestingly, the vice president also tried to pass off this responsibility. I remember his staffers telling me that they were bringing in a woman named Dr. Deborah Birx, who is going to be leading these briefings. But that's, of course, not what happened. The president wanted to take over the messaging, and it was an absolute disaster. It was an abdication of responsibility. This White House repeatedly lied to the American people about the threat posed by this virus. They put misinformation in the bloodstream so that people are now, many of them are reluctant to get this vaccine. There was so much distrust of this administration, of the government, based on its handling of this pandemic, going back to the early days, the CDC bungling the rollout of tests, of other sort of technology that people needed to try to get a sense of just how widespread this was. So this was an absolute disaster, and a large part of the reason that the president was not reelected is because the things that he said during those briefings, his insistence on taking over the messaging, on telling people things that were not true, contradicting his own medical team, people saw through that. While they were willing to look past questions about Russian meddling, questions about porn stars, questions about pressuring foreign leaders for political favors. When it came to the pandemic, this was an issue of life and death, and it was clear every time the president entered the White House briefing room that he was not being honest. And even as they try to pass responsibility onto local governments, the fact is that this was the Trump administration's failure, and this will forever be one of the biggest parts of his legacy.
Yeah, you know, even during last night's address, the video address that he put out, he characterized the pandemic as a win for his administration. That the vaccines were, were going swimmingly, and we know that is just not the case. We know that his administration has fallen tremendously short when it comes to the promised number of people who would be vaccinated, that there are some areas of this country, some states that are warning they're about to run out of vaccine. But that's what he chose to deliver yesterday. And once again, he called it, the China virus. And this is taped. He's not winging it. It was deliberate. And so for sure, the coronavirus, I think, is going to overshadow things. Certainly the events of the last couple of weeks, the insurrection at the Capitol, the second impeachment. But I want to ask you, Weijia, yesterday the president listed off a number of things that he considered his accomplishments, and many of them will be disputed. But he did have some wins. What would you identify as at least a few of his wins during his tenure?
Well, I mean, if you look at the economy, the fact is it was thriving for 3 years. And whether that's because President Obama left him a foundation to build on or not, under the Trump administration, people had more money in their pockets and they were feeling it, which is exactly why he was so hesitant to embrace mitigation efforts to curb the virus, because he was worried about how that would impact the economy and those shining numbers. And, even though it is not a peace deal that he has said, it is significant that he has normalized relations and brokered an understanding between Israel and 4 Arab countries, because that is something that the Biden administration can build on moving forward as they ultimately try to have a sweeping peace deal in that region.